nice to be back over here. It's a great job that Austin's done to bring the US Grand Prix back over to this part of the world. We used to always go to the US Grand Prix up in Watkins Glen, upstate New York. It was never really ready for something as big as a Grand Prix. But in those days, of course, it wasn't as big as it is today. But we had 100,000 people there, but there were no hotels for them. They were camping out. It was like a music festival more than it was a motor race. And the little Watkins Glen and the Finger Lakes of upstate New York wasn't exactly what Austin, Texas is. So we're all very happy to be here. The racetrack is probably the best new racetrack that we've had in Formula One for a very long time. The design of it, the topography of it, the fact that that long straight along the front straight with the rise to the very first corner is one of the best pieces of thought that's going into the first lap. Pretty impressive. There's a lot of movement going on when you go into the first corner of any circuit. But when you climb up at that rate and then get into the corner, it's really quite something. From my point of view, I've had a long record of motorsport in Texas. I used to drive for a man called John Meekum out of Houston, Texas. I did Can-Am for him, and I did the Indianapolis 500 for him a couple of times. Never won the Indy 500, unfortunately. One of my best friends, Jim Clark, did win it, of course. But I was leading it in the mid-60s. I was leading it by 2 laps, with only 8 laps to go. That's a 5-mile advantage with only 8 laps to go after 192 laps. And I had a little engine failure. I can't remember what engine was, but I remember it had 4 letters and it began with F. But I didn't actually call it that. And then I came back the very next year, again to Indy, was lying second ahead of A.J. Foyt, and the same component of the engine failed in exactly the same part of the racetrack, just going into turn 2. And of course, in those days, you would freewheel a long way back.
Yeah, I mean, I like
But anyway, I didn't win the Indy 500. To have such a close shave, frankly, the Scottish economy hasn't overcome that considerable financial loss. And neither has Jackie Stewart, for that matter. So any contribution you would like to make today is willingly accepted. Motor racing's changed a lot since I was driving. In those days, they were changed. Watkins Glen was a great racetrack. And of course, we went to Riverside, California. We went to Atlanta, Georgia to do Can-Am. We did a lot of races upstate. We did go to Watkins Glen for the Can-Am, as well as Road Atlanta, and all the good racetracks. But it certainly wasn't safe in those days. What you're seeing here, the modern Formula One, is entirely a different animal. First of all, it's bigger. Formula One is now the largest television sport in the world. Now that's very difficult for you Americans to understand, because you've got something called football. Actually, football is soccer, just in case you don't know. You invented something You Americans invented something where you actually pick up the ball and run with it. Ridiculous. You've got to keep it down on the ground with your feet. You've got to understand that. Then you've got something called basketball and something called baseball. Now, these are very big sports in this country, but they're minute in television coverage in comparison to Formula One. It is bigger than the Olympics for television, and it's bigger than the Soccer World Cup. That's difficult to understand, but they're only every 4 years, whereas Formula One is every single weekend from the beginning of March, every 2 weeks almost, until the end of November, because this is the second last race in the championship. We go down to Brazil for the next one. So therefore the audience is quite colossal. Our crowd attendances probably are not as big because we have only 20 events in the year. But in those 20 events we've got more than 3 million people attending Formula One. When we go to Australia, which is a long way away, we're talking about 300,000 to 400,000 people during a weekend of a country that's got a very small population in real terms. So they have around 40,000 people coming in from abroad to go to Melbourne to see the Grand Prix. And when they do that, they don't just stay in Melbourne, they go up to the Gold Coast, they go to the Barrier Reef, they go to Alice Springs, they go to Sydney. So it's a huge attraction. And it's the government who support the financing of Formula One now in almost every country in the world, whether that's Bahrain or Abu Dhabi, whether it's Singapore, wherever we go, in most cases it's government supported for tourism and for the business sector. We need Formula One for the motor industry. The United States of America is still one of the biggest marketplaces in the world. So for people like Mercedes-Benz, for example, if they didn't have the United States and if Ferrari didn't have the United States, they would not be alive. The sales of Mercedes-Benz and, for example, Ferrari is so big in America that really this is a very important country for us to be reunited, Formula One and the marketplace.
Chris is 50%
so
of that
we're all
market.
happy to be here.
You're 50% of the American
It has lots of
market.
things. Commercially, I wear a Rolex watch. Where did I buy my Rolex watch? My first ever Rolex watch, Houston, Texas. The economy was down at that time in America and I felt sorry for you, so I decided to buy a Rolex watch. That was the beginning. Now I've been with Rolex, I'm under contract with Rolex. I've now been with them 45 years, so it's a long time. I was the first guy to spray champagne in Formula One. Now I'm on the board of Moët Hennessy. And I'm drinking considerably more than I spray nowadays. If you have a bottle up here, I'll spray it now. I mean, this bunch look as if they have to be waking
Brian,
up.
can you bring a bottle up for Jackie?
So, and the other thing that's changed enormously is safety. I've just done an interview with the New York Times before I got over here, and we were just talking about the safety thing. He asked a question. When I was racing, if I raced for 5 years in Formula One, there was a 2 out of 3 chance I was going to die. That's the reality. 1 out of 3 you were going to live. Ridiculous. The safety precautions were hideous. Here in Austin, Texas, you look at the barriers, the deformable structures. When a car hits them hard, they deform, they remove the shock, which doesn't get transmitted to the driver as much as it did in those days. So we've now gone, and this is probably the best example of risk management of any industry, of any corporation, or of any sport in the world. It's now been 19 years, 7 months, and 11 days since we lost the life of a Formula One driver in a Formula One car. If you think about that, at 300 kilometers an hour or over 200 miles an hour, human error, mechanical failure, and yet nobody's lost their lives. There's been some big accidents, but almost on every occasion they've walked away from it. That's a different story. So Formula One needs a good platform. I began the safety movement because so many of my friends were killed. Helm and I counted 95 people that we knew well enough to be racing with them, traveling with them, holidaying with them, or just being friends with them, who died in motorsport in those years. I jovially say it's not really a joke, but of course these were different times. It was the swinging 60s and the 70s. I tell everybody that when I was driving, motor racing was dangerous and sex was safe. I completely fixed the motor racing. You were responsible for the other bit. So therefore, it has changed. And here in Austin, Texas, this is another good example of how safety has been built into the racetrack. The medical facility here, if something does happen, they've got everything that's required. That's part of the requirement of a Formula One event. It's a compulsory factor. So we've got the right people medically here. You know, so many drivers have been jump-started nowadays. They've actually died and have been jump-started while still on the track because we've got the right resuscitation people. Hakkinen died twice in Australia in an accident. And we got to him, the medical people got to him, jump-started him. He then foolishly died again, and they jump-started him again. And now he's running around as an ambassador for Johnny Walker, for Christ's sake. So this little relapse probably got him from vodka to whiskey. And Scotland will be forever grateful for that anaesthetist who did the job. So we're happy to be here. So Vettel's had an amazing year. Certainly the most mature 26-year-old racing driver I've ever met. He's been greatly advantaged by having Adrian Newey as the designer of his cars. The most brilliant designer in the history of the sport. Colin Chapman was pretty good, but Adrian Newey's done it an even better and safer way. His cars stay together. And of course Red Bull has considerable financial support, but certainly not any more than anybody else, certainly not as big as Ferrari. And I see a man over there wearing a very silly hat, a red hat with something on the front. I don't know what it stands for, but that's prancing horse, they say. But really, Ferrari have got more money than anyone else, and yet they're not beating Red Bull. The team's very well run, very well engineered, and Vettel is driving his car extremely well. He's dominated the year. He's done 4 World Championships back-to-back. Very few people have done that. Fangio did it, I think. I think maybe Schumacher also. But in those days, Schumacher, his car was more superior. But not only that, there wasn't the same amount of talent in the driver stakes when Schumacher was doing it as when Vettel's done it. There's a very good group out there, whether it's Lewis Hamilton or Rosberg, whether it's Mark Webber, or whether it's Alonso, or whether it's the whole team out there in Formula One at the moment is a very high standard. Probably the best group of Formula One drivers since the late 60s or early 70s, when we had Mario Andretti and we had Graham Hill and Jim Clark, Jackie Hicks, we had Francois Cervera, we had Jack Brabham, Niki Lauda, a whole bunch of us, all at the same time, which is quite unusual. This year we've got a lot of talent out there, but there is no doubt the Red Bull has got a significant advantage at the moment. But the drivers still got to keep it on the road and keep it reliable and stay out of trouble. I think the idea is that you would like to have a Q&A here, and if you would like to hear some of your questions answered, I'd be more than happy to do that. Just in case you're questioning the fact of silly hats, this silly hat is a Stewart tartan, but it's the racing Stewart. The Royal Stewart is what I wore around my helmet. And just a little history for you. Royal Stewart is red, and the reason for that is that when the Scots they were very anxious to fight amongst themselves. They preferred to fight against the English, of course, but when we occasionally had battles, sometimes they would be from clan to clan. If you were wearing red, the sash would go round the clan chieftain, and he would be in the white horse, and he would be in front. If he were bloodied, in other words, if he were damaged, injured, they wouldn't see the blood. So therefore it didn't show him to be weak in front of his own army or those of the competition. So that was the Royal Stewart, which I wore on my helmet. The hunting Stewarts, which my son used to race with, is green, hunting in the grass, green, different colours of green. There's very many tartans in Scotland for good reason. There's a whole bunch of people like the McPhersons and the Campbells and the McGregors. I married a McGregor actually, which was probably a mistake, because they came from a very long line of sheep stealers, and that my wife's kept up that piece of history. She takes advantage of me financially on a regular basis, and I've been stuck with her for 51 years. Thank you very much for your sympathy. So that's a little bit about Scotland. So that's the reason for the tartan trousers and the tartan hat. Again, of course, we've got more people going to America from Scotland than any other country in the world. We send quite a lot to Australia and New Zealand, but many more to the United States and Canada. You look after us very well, you pay us very well. You are paying me very well, aren't you?
We're paying you very, very well, yes, sir.
I don't really believe that, but never mind. At any rate, very nice to be with you, very nice to be in Austin, Texas, and congratulations to the whole organisation for putting together such a wonderful event. Our international body are very happy to be here. Thank you very much.
So we're going to start with a little Q&A, and I would like to ask maybe the first question. You know, 3 years in Silverstone, when we first met with you and talked to you about that we were going to build a track in Austin, Texas, and we're going to bring back Formula One racing to the United States, you said one thing. You said, if you do it, you have to get it right because there's only one opportunity to get this done. We had a pretty successful Grand Prix last year between basically the drivers, the teams, fans, the media. Really raved your reviews. From a global aspect, can you speak to the importance of Formula One racing, you know, in the United States and how really the world views the United States Grand Prix and Circuit of the Americas?
Well, there's no doubt. As I mentioned earlier, this is a great big marketplace. I mean, today we look at China as a big marketplace for the whole world. Singapore is a very important place for us to go for financial services. Singapore is certainly the capital of the Far East. We go to the Middle East in Bahrain and Abu Dhabi. That area of the world will be the richest in liquidity probably for the next 20 to 30 years. Russia, nobody quite knows how to deal with the Russians yet and how to do business with them, but we're going to Russia next year. We know how to deal with the Middle East. We've dealt with them as traders for a great many years, but the United States of America is still the biggest place. You have the largest companies, and what you are lacking is American drivers. You've got to get more American drivers, and the only way you're going to do that is send them abroad. You can't keep them domestically. There's not enough good motor racing in any country. The Finns come to Southern Europe to do their motorsport. They can't stay in Finland. They've got to come. The Brazilians don't stay in Brazil. Whether it's Massa, whether it was Senna, whether it was Fittipaldi, whether it was Piquet, they all come to the UK, France, Italy or Germany. They've got to come to the good school, the toughest school. So therefore, unless you get Americans to do that, you've had Dan Gurney, you had Phil Hill as a world champion, and you had Mario Andretti as a very good world champion. That's fine, but now you really got to get your feet together and get them over there. To do that, they'll need money. It's not like hitting a tennis ball against a wall. Every time you start a motor, it costs money. There's only a certain number of racing miles or racing hours in an engine. You run tires, you run out of brakes, you run out of fuel and oil. It costs money. But you're a rich country. You need to get some American drivers. We would love to to have a couple or three top-line American drivers, and it would be a big thing. We would get more of a crowd if we had more American drivers. So we need that. That's great news. The great news, however, is that you've got one of the best facilities in the world. And therefore you should be proud of that. You should certainly not be shy. And even if we got 10% of your 300 million people interested in coming to this Grand Prix, that would be a big crowd of folk. So there is room for it. There's a lot of people like fine motor cars, and there's no reason at all why it can't be more important than it currently is. So that's down to you guys. A whole lot of you right in here could start picking up some young drivers and really get them developed, and who knows, you might make a lot of money out of them. If I were racing today, I would earn no less than 100 million a year driving a Formula One car. So if you take, you look quite rich. If you were to start my grandson and get him really into the top end and suddenly be making 100 grand a year, more than 100 million a year, 10% of that, you could keep this wife of yours. Nearly. Yeah, okay. Anyway, let's hope you do that, and that would mean more.
So we're going to open up the questioning to the audience here. And just raise your hand, and then the gentleman with microphones will come out.
Gentleman there.
Hi, Jack.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for taking some time.
Where are you?
Today.
Oh, there you are.
There's did some movies recently and even some magazines just been talking
Hang on,
about.
Bruce, maybe you need to come back up here, because sometimes I don't hear clearly. This is my motor racing ear, and this is my wife ear. So I'm pretty deaf. Whatever one you wish.
What would you consider, of all the drivers that you've raced against, who pushed you the hardest, and who would you consider, not necessarily a rival, but who pushed you to do your best and compete your best?
I could hear you clearly. The best driver I ever raced against was Jim Clark, fellow Scot. Very smooth, very clean, never upset the car. You know, Formula One cars are very sensitive, highly strung animals. And Jim Clark knew exactly how to do that. Vettel's going in the same direction. He's still too young to really have it to its finest level. But I learned everything from Jim Clark. And if you're very gentle, I might say this to the ladies in here. A Formula One racing car is a highly strung animal. A little bit like your husbands or your boyfriends. If you treat them really nicely, really sweetly, you coax them into things that you want them to do, and you're really sweet with them, and you're not abrasive with them, and you're not forcing them into things, they will give you best performance, best benefits, and you've really got to take note of this, girls. So it's the same as a racing car. So I could do it in the other sex, but then I would get lawsuits. So, yeah, Jim Clark was the best racing driver I ever raced against. But my hero was Fangio. He was a wonderful man. But Jimmy to race against, unbeatable. Yes, sir.
First of all, sir, it's an honor to be speaking to you. It's just excellent to see you here. With this track, we've heard that the drivers enjoy it, that it's a very good track, a fun track to race. We know it's a great viewers track. How would you compare some of the newer tracks, some of the Toki design tracks, compared to some of the classic tracks from a driver's perspective, from the standpoint of are they exciting, are they fun, are they great, good racing?
Yeah, I got the question. This track, what makes it good and how did that come about? This is a very good track. What's not, we've had one designer design most of the new Grand Prix tracks in the world. He's very good at what he does. He knows where to put all the cables because we've got section times, we've got a lot of technology that needs to be built in. And Tilke is this German. he knows how to do that. However, just think of it in another light. I used to play a lot of golf. Takes too much time right now. Too much time. Muirfield, St Andrews, Turnberry, Carnoustie. That's just 4. Troon, 5. Prestwick, 6. Never mind these ones in England that we don't need to talk about. But put into that your great American golf courses. Augusta. All of those, none of them were designed by the same person. They were all different designers. Now think about that. Our racetracks are generally being designed by one man. I think this one had a lot of impact and input from your American team that were doing it here. That's good, because it is a little different than what I would say the normal Tilka track. Nothing wrong with a Tilka track. All I'm saying is that if you had the choice, you would want to see a different designer working different challenges, different things to beat, different types of corners. And that's why these golf courses have become the greatest in the world. So, Trent Jones was a great designer of golf courses, so is Arnold Palmer, so is Jack Nicklaus, obviously. But they're not all designed by these same people. And Pebble Beach wasn't designed by Jack Nicklaus. So I think there needs to be a little bit more of a change of designers to get different look, different feel, and different challenges. But this one is extremely good.
Well, what about how do they compare with his tracks in these days?
So Jackie, I have a question and a bit of praise. Thank you very much for the phrase, to finish first, the first half to finish. I heard that decades ago, and I've run my life by it accordingly, so thank you. And the question is, just after you retired, they gave you a chance to go back and drive the 6-wheel Tyrrell, and I was looking at the YouTube, and you gave it the corporate look. You could see in your face you didn't like it, but you weren't going to badmouth the Tyrrell. With 4 decades now between today and when you drove the 6-wheel Tyrrell, did that car really have any opportunity? Now, you were past your career, they gave you a chance to give it input. What's your thought on the 6 wheels? Were they really just a waste of engineering time?
I actually never raced the 6-wheel Tyrrell. I did drive it. I tested it because I had already retired when the 6-wheel Tyrrell arrived. It was created to gain speed mainly in the straights, but still not to sacrifice the corners. So the frontal area of the car was considerably less, and therefore considerably less wind resistant than the big wheels that they had to wear when they were only using 4 wheels. It did win a couple of Grand Prix, but it was not a success in the fullest sense. And then it was banned by the governing body of the sport because they thought it was becoming a little too unusual. Not too many road cars in the world had 4 wheels in the front. So therefore it was a 6-wheel car, and there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm for that within the governing body. March made one, Cosworth made one, but was never raced. So it was a little jewel in somebody's mind that might have been laying down what the future may have held at that time for performance cars. So they decided they didn't want 6 wheels. But it wasn't a big success. As I say, it won a couple of Grand Prix, but never a series of Grand Prix. And as I say, I drove it. I didn't particularly like it, but it got around the circuit quite well. But not really good enough. Yes, sir. We've got a question here.
Yeah, Jackie, thanks for coming. And so we're new to F1's back in America. We all know the power of social media and the stuff that what can we as fans, where should we direct that power that we have through social media with your connections with people in the industry? Where should we direct that to help promote from our end?
I'm sorry, to direct what?
The power of social media, tweet.
Social media.
Yeah, right.
I think you've got stronger media in this country almost than anywhere else. I mean, electronic media now seems to be the biggest thing. Formula One .com is quite small. It only had 67 million hits last year. You've got print very strong in this country. You've got radio very strong in this country, both global, not global, but in nationwide as well as local. You've got a lot of television channels, more than any other country in the world, I suspect. I watched television this morning before coming here, and there must have been 6 or 7 local stations. And we don't get that in most European countries, and you don't get them in the Far East either. So I think motorsport, you know, the motor vehicle is probably the most powerful vehicle in transportation. It doesn't matter what you do with planes or trains. It doesn't matter what you do in sea, delivering containers, etc. The motor vehicle, there is no viable alternative for the motor vehicle in the foreseeable future of the world. Because whenever the plane lands, and even if it's a cargo plane, there's got to be road transportation to take it to its final destination. And the independence of having a private vehicle, you know, nobody's going to go on buses all the time. So therefore, the motor vehicle still has an enormous amount to do with the world. And they're now coming out of the jungle and coming out of the desert straight into motor vehicles, which never happened before. China's bigger than America to have motor vehicles. India is now going to be bigger than America for motor vehicles. So the motor industry is the third largest, transportation is the third largest manufacturing industry in the world. First is construction, second is food and beverage, third is transportation. So the motor vehicle is going to be here a long time. Because of that, you're going to have it in competition. So in one form or another, whether it's called NASCAR or whether it's called IndyCar or whether it's called Formula One, you're going to have motorsports. And that's going to take a few years to get the Chinese into motorsports as a culture. You're going to have more karting tracks in America. We've got many more karting tracks in Europe, even in the UK, than you have in America. Without karting, you ain't going to have any new young guys coming along, or hopefully new girls. We could be doing with a few more women in motorsport. Can you imagine how much a woman Grand Prix driver would make with all of the products available to women? My God. I think I'll become a manager, and if any of the really attractive women in this room would like to become racing drivers, I'd like them to follow me out of this, and we'll have discussions. You see, there's a likely starter right there. Anyway, that's what we need. So we need more in competition. Motorsports is going to be a giant for as long as any of us in this room are going to live. It's going to be there for a long time. So that's why it's good to have a big state like Texas, to have something like this event, to bring the world to it. It's no good of being domestic. You're going to be small thinkers if you stay domestic. You've got to be global thinkers. That's why the Coca-Colas in this world, the Boeings, the Microsofts, the Apples have done so well as global companies. So that's what you have to do. And motorsport around the rest of the world is a giant, and it's never going to get any smaller. So I hope that halfway answers your question. Here we are.
Yeah, I'd like to know what you think, how you think that the new change to engines, the V6 engines, is going to affect the series going into next year.
I didn't hear all that. The speakers are facing you, not me. Oh yeah, there's a new engine for 2000 and, where are we? 14, yeah. Smaller engine. Basically because of the ecology. We felt in Formula One we weren't doing enough to develop the ecology, and we were being criticized with high revving big engines. We've got a small engine, it's a 3-litre engine. I've passed a certain American pickup truck yesterday, and it had a 5.4 litre engine in it. There's one with 6 litre engines in it. You're so rich over here that it doesn't really matter how much fuel you drink. But we're running with fuel economy. The Scots started that. We're very mean. So therefore, we've gone down to 1.6 litre, nearly half the size. We're going to use half as much fuel in our Formula One car next year for this race than we are doing now. That's a big statement. So we all have to contribute to the economy and to the ecology. And therefore, it's very expensive for us to go to that new engine at a time when the global economy hasn't yet come back to hitting all cylinders. So it might have been held back for a couple of years, in my opinion, but they were so far down the road with it that they had to stay with it. You'll see less reliability next year than you're seeing this year, because this is the end of a well-developed engine. But we're doing the right thing, I'm sure. Yes, over here, nice and close to the mouth.
Sir Jackie, hopefully you can understand me with my very thick Scottish accent. The well-publicised issues at Lotus with Kimi Räikkönen seeing Heikki Kovalainen driving this weekend, there was also rumours about Michael Schumacher being approached, and Nico Hülkenberg was also in the frame. Can you shed any light on the Schumacher story, and also do you know who's going to be in that second Lotus seat for next year?
Is that a Scottish voice?
It is indeed, Sir Jackie, yes.
Where are you from?
From Broughty Ferry by the Sea, Scotland's Riviera.
Fantastic. You get them everywhere.
Unfortunately so.
They usually come for the money, by the way, the Scots. They come over to America for the money. There's more than one Formula One team currently have had liquidity issues, and Lotus is one of them. The people who own the company, Genie, this one here, are two very well-off young men. One's 43, the other one's 40. And they made a lot of money. They were the first investors in Skype, for example, so they know what they're doing. But like everybody, there's a budget. And they budgeted for a certain amount of money, and the team has spent more money than was budgeted for. So therefore they do have financial issues, and Kimi Räikkönen is owed a considerable amount of money. He'll get it, but it wasn't paid at the time that it should have been paid. There's Sauber have been having financial difficulties, so have Force India and a few other teams. But that will be overcome. It's a very expensive business. In the case of Lotus, I can tell you we're 550 people in our factory. 550 people looking after two ballerina, prima donna racing drivers. It's a lot of people with some of the finest equipment in the world. You know, we change so rapidly in Formula One. Since the Grand Prix that we had in Abu Dhabi, we've got 6 major changes in the Lotus car for this race, and it's the second last race. That means that we've had 24-hour machine shop manufacturing going on. 3 sets of 8 hours to make 24 hours. We've been working all that time to design the new piece from Abu Dhabi, to then manufacture it, to assemble it, then get it over here. And it'll be in these cars this weekend. That kind of expense doesn't exist in other sports. So it is a costly business, and there have been quite a few teams suffering financially. The driver's side, Kimi is going to Ferrari. He's been there before. He knows what he's getting himself into. Alonso's not all that pleased that he's there. He doesn't want the competition. Kovalainen is going to race here. I think he can do quite well this weekend. The Lotus car is a very good car. It's been picking up points all of the time, but you've got to have 2 drivers picking up championship points. That's why Red Bull are so successful. Mark Webber is a very talented racing driver. So many times they've been first and second, or first and third. World Championship points for the Constructors' Championship, is where the money comes in, not just from the sponsorship. So it's part of the growing pains. Hulkenberg, very good young driver, too tall. You really want to be a man of average height. Well, you big Americans, you're going to have to downsize to be Grand Prix drivers. So when that happens, you've got, Kinney is a small guy, so is a whole bunch of them are really men of average height. Much better. Difficult for Webber. He's too tall. The weight distribution of the car changes. So it's amazing. Tall people are at a disadvantage in a Formula One car. But I don't think Schumacher will come back. He's done that once and it wasn't a great success. I don't see why it's going to change. And if he were to come back, he would want to come back to Red Bull. Maybe Ferrari, but it would take them a couple of years to get themselves back in shape again, even with Schumacher. And he's at an age now where he simply will not be as good as he was. And these young drivers have no respect in a case like that. It's just you've got to be quick, and if you're quick, you win. So the Lotus lineup for next year is not yet confirmed. Do we have another question? Yes, sir.
Hi, thanks for giving us the opportunity to ask questions. Formula One has been famous for its conspiracy theories and pushing the edge of the rules, whether it's double diffuser or FDOT this year, to talk about traction control on Seb's car that maybe Mark doesn't have. What are your thoughts on the conspiracies and pushing the rules? And even if there are conspiracies, should we care? Is it just part of the game?
Yes, the regulations, it's how you interpret the regulations. And if you interpret them as creatively as people like Adrian Newey, you have a little bit of a faster car. And then everybody's upset. So there is a working group of all of the technical directors from each team, and they meet regularly. But you will see, if you have, from wherever you're sitting, watching the race tomorrow, when the grid forms, you will see, if you have a pair of binoculars, you almost need binoculars, you will see Adrian Newey, who's the leader. He will walk to every single car at the front half of the grid, and he'll be trying to look between the legs of all the mechanics, because the car is here, they're all standing like this. There's a line of them trying to block off any photographers or Adrian Newey from looking at what the back end of the car is. And Ross Brawn will be doing exactly the same thing, and so also will the Ferrari guys. Because it's been 2 weeks since Abu Dhabi, the components I was just explaining that have been thrown over here, arriving this morning, in 5-seater Samsonites, or whatever it may be, the guy's flying back on the same plane. He's just delivered them. They want to see what they are. And if they are stretching the elastic of the regulations, that's up to the technical directors of the governing body to decide whether it's legal or illegal. And quite recently, Kimi Räikkönen was knocked to the back of the grid because his floor was deemed to be a little illegal. In motor racing, you can be a little bit pregnant. Yes.
Sir Jackie, this is great.
I'm hearing.
I was curious, did you see the movie Rush? And since you knew Lauda and Hunt back in the day, what did you think?
I thought it was a good movie. I enjoyed it. I went to the London premiere. I thought the actor who did Nicky was better than Nicky. And I think I wouldn't be at all surprised if that guy gets nominated for an Oscar. I mean, he was fantastic. He lived with Nicky for a while. I mean, he's got the same expressions, he walks the same way, he talks the same way. I thought he was a genius at doing Nicky Lauda. And James, the guy who played James, got a lot of good luck. You women took terrible disadvantages against poor James Hunt. You took advantage of James in an appalling fashion. He would never have been interested in all of these girls if they hadn't pushed themselves against him. I think it's shocking. I was really disappointed by the behaviour of some of these girls. It was really quite accurate. James's life was just what you saw in the film. And that's why he only won the World Championship once. You see, I won it 3 times. And I was so focused and so committed to my sport that apparently when I was racing there was a lot of really attractive women hanging around. And I just never saw them. It's a really sad story. But James had different eyes, and obviously he didn't have a Helen walking around immediately behind him all the time. But no, I like the film very much, and I think it will do a lot for Formula One, and particularly in America, because, you know, America's not really into Formula One. But if people go and see that movie, I hope they'll enjoy it, because it's quite representative of the sport in every way. How are we doing? Where are we? Oh, here we are. Oh, a man with a silly shirt. Stand up. I mean, can you believe that? And it's an old model, because it's got Marlboro on it.
That is correct. That is correct.
Did your father give you that?
Yes, he did. I do know. So, you know, in Texas, we enjoy our guns and rifles. And I know we enjoy our guns and rifles here in Texas. I know you're a champion clay pigeon shooter. Have you had the opportunity to get out and do some shooting here?
No, sadly not. Trap shooting, there was, the thing I was half decent at was Olympic trap, which is 15 trap. I shot for Scotland and I shot for Great Britain before I was ever a racing driver. I did it from the age of 14 until I was 23. I got married when I was 23, and shooting was a kind of amateur sport, no money in it. And this shows you the lack of intelligence of the Scottish mind. I thought I couldn't afford shooting and marriage. And I gave up shooting thinking I could afford marriage. I had to become a racing driver to afford the wife, and I'm still behind in the payments. So my shooting was a very important part of my life. My father was a great shot. My grandfather was a gamekeeper. So I was born fishing and shooting. And it was one of the best lessons. As far as developing my skills as a competitor, much more difficult than motor racing. If you miss a target at the early part of a competition, you never get it back. You'll only be 99 out of 100 or whatever. You never get it back. So the discipline of trying to remove the downside risk or the error, the mind management, I learned in shooting, not from motor racing. And motor racing, for me, my career was benefited considerably by my education as a shooter. Yeah.
All right, that's going to kind of conclude the question and answer session. I want to thank you all.